What do I call you guys?
Antushka and Mr. X.
Mr. X?
Mr. X.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't call you like Brother Z.
Well, you're Brother X. I guess you can call me Brother Z if you want.
Yeah.
X has a whole special meaning now after this chapter.
That's right.
God. Wait, so real quick, so you don't, I thought you said you had a USB microphone. Are you just going into your headphones?
No, it's right here. It's in front of me. Yeah.
Doesn't sound
It's right
good.
here. Oh,
God.
So the Zoom is going through.
Oh, the Zoom's going through your headphones. Oh, that makes more sense. Okay.
Zoom. I could change the Zoom to my USB, but the USB is recording into a DAW right now.
That's all that matters. Cool.
That's all that matters? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah. Don't worry.
I can't chastise regular guests, but of course, we're family.
Right. You're a highly irregular guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's.
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah. No, yeah, that's a good point. X has a whole new meaning.
Yeah, yes, I have written down in my notes, post X unknown.
There you go.
I suppose it's 10. But
It is, actually.
Yeah. Because it's the 10th muse or whatever, right?
I'm not going to lie. So I had read this chapter years ago, and when I was reading it this time, all I could think about when I got to that part was when Apple went from iPhone 8 to iPhone X and how much that pissed me off. But maybe they were scared away by the tyranny of number 9, just like so many post-Beethoven composers were. They couldn't handle the pressure of doing a 9th iPhone.
Yeah, this all makes perfect sense.
I actually didn't realize they jumped from 8 to 10.
They did. Yeah. It pissed me off. No, but they didn't even call it 10. They called it X.
And Schumann went from Opus 3 to Opus X.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, real quick. Right. So we're reading Listen, A History of Our Years, right? And this is Brother X.
Right. This is Brother X.
So is this episode 10.x?
My God. It is actually. No, I'm not even. Yeah, this is actually episode 10.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So it's episode X.
Dude, episode X. Well,
what is going on?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I think serendipity is a good word for that.
There you go. Yeah.
Very much so.
Serendipity. Hey, I put the dip in serendipity.
Yeah, right.
God, we're off to a good start. Yeah, well, actually, technically, this is like a 25th episode.
Should we introduce you? How do we do this? Because it's vaguely anonymous.
Nobody knows me, right?
Exactly.
I'm not supposed to even tell people I'm here, right?
Yeah. Nobody's here.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want anybody listening to this.
Basically. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, but you do music stuff, right?
I do music stuff.
Yeah.
And,
how vague can we be about it?
I like music and I don't know.
I do not like music for the record.
That's why I picked this book. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, and I remember, I mean, were you reading this around the time that you were thinking about going to grad school, right? And then sort of
So I was reading this around the time that I was thinking about doing a PhD.
Or you did go to grad school. But
I did go to grad school, but other grad school.
Yeah. Because you were thinking about, I mean, do you want to talk, you don't have to talk about that, but if you want, it's an interesting background.
Here's what I'll talk about, is that I love the concept of arranging. And this chapter, where he talks about like that arrangers are people who write down how they hear a song, that just really resonated with me because, and this is what I like about this chapter, but in general the concept of arrangement is I think it's a nice cross section between like music philosophy but also music practice. And yeah, and so like this chapter does sometimes go down the rabbit hole philosophically, and it also just goes down the rabbit hole of sometimes I would guess that this writer just likes hearing his own words.
Yes.
There's a few like circular reasonings that he gets to where it's like, all right, we didn't really need to spend time on that, but in general, like I love that concept of. I think the other thing for me too, because when I would do arrangements. and I still do to an extent. It's easy to get caught up in like, well, what was the original intent? What did the composer want this to be? And how do I, translate that into guitar now? And when I think about it as I'm just writing down my hearing of it, I think for me, it freed me up from that a little bit, in that the legitimacy of me arranging it is that I hear the song, this is what I like about it, this is what's important to me, and to the extent that it's important to somebody else, they might like this arrangement of it, because they're now hearing it through my ears.
Yes.
Right.
So to me, it freed me up a little bit of like, it's not that I don't care about the composer, because, I like the piece for a reason, and the composer has something to do with that, but it freed me up from having to be totally wedded to trying to figure out what was in their head when they were writing it, which is an impossible task. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all of that. And I should say, because we've already slandered the author, who's alive, by the way.
He is, who I'd actually love to meet at some point.
We haven't slandered
special
him.
Surprise. We
that's right. We haven't
just off camera.
Just off camera. Yeah.
We haven't slandered, but we will be telling our opinions about his work, because it's a public forum and everything like that. But he does, he is a live professor, and
a real live professor.
And I was going to say, I want to say all this, that like I agree, I think generally with what he's saying and what you said and all the sort of good things that you got out of it. But yeah, I think he does not do a very good job at getting that idea out simply. But he is a philosopher and a musicologist, so I don't know. He's got a lot of things working against himself.
He does.
I have a few like 2-paragraph segments highlighted with just what?
Yes.
Wait. We've started, right?
Yeah, we're going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we give like? I've listened to some of your episodes, and in the ones I've heard, you don't typically summarize. Like, should we give a summary?
We should.
Okay.
Well, I think we've started doing that more. But yes,
we're not always great at it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well,
I was gonna try to be really well prepared for that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, because you've read the full book, right?
I've read the whole book, yeah.
Yes. If you want to give a quick summary of the book, that'd be great.
I don't want to give a quick summary of the book.
Oh.
I'll give a quick summary of the book. I haven't read it, but...
Yeah.
Okay. But the chapter, I think just to set up the 3.5 people who are listening, the chapter is about...
Hey, I resent that. Or resemble? One of the two.
Yeah.
Hello,
well,
Mom.
Your listenership's going to tank now that they know that Brother X is on it. So,
That's true. No.
They're like, not Brother X.
No, if anything, it'll tank just because we're not talking about politics anymore.
Actually, I did think that too.
Yeah.
Did you tell people?
We'll get back to it. No, I mean, we'll get back to it.
They'll find out, and they will not enjoy it.
Yeah. It's okay.
Well,
it is a philosophy podcast.
Give the people what they don't want.
Exactly. Yeah. Let them not eat cake.
Let them not eat, yeah.
Sorry, so you're going to summarize the book. Summarize the book. No.
The chapter, right?
Yeah,
so,
right. Sure.
I'll just say this, right? So, like, jumping off from the Stokowski orchestration of the Bach Toccata and Fugue in D minor, he kind of lays out that there's an established view of arrangement that is, it's simply a means of transmitting a piece of music, right? And in the case of that Stokowski arrangement or orchestration, it was, his own words were that he orchestrated it because people don't listen to organ music anymore, so if they're going to hear this, they have to hear it in the orchestra instead of on the organ. And the author, Peter Szendy, I don't even know if that's how you say his name. Never met
Sounded good to me.
But he's basically saying, this is fundamentally wrong, but that arrangements exist like in a critical and active relationship with works of art. And at least what I got out of it is that they're kind of no further from the essence of that work than the original is itself. And so then he kind of goes into a little bit of like the history of arrangements and, in a nutshell, like that there's been different views throughout history of like does a work exist unto itself, or does it exist only in performance? And how does a performer have to interact with that? And thereby, how does an arranger have to interact with that too? It talks about like the different functions of arrangement, whether it's just for communication and diffusion, or he even talks about like examples where it's kind of clarifying or even corrective on the original. He goes into Liszt and kind of this comparison between arranging and translating. Then he goes down the rabbit hole of translation for a while, which is where he really loses me. And then he surfaces a little bit to my favorite part where he's talking about Schumann, Schumann, right?
Schumann.
Schumann and sort of that arrangement could be kind of a practical, in a practical sense, like an art of musical criticism. And then he kind of closes out talking about the decline of arrangement. But my question to you both is, did arranging actually decline?
Yeah, actually, I had that same question.
And here
who's going to answer?
That was my first thought. I was like, wait, when did arranging go away?
Yeah. Has Peter Szendy not seen Mr. X's TikTok channel?
Well, no, I mean, I think you're right. I think his question is one that's posed to the academic world in probably the world that he's in.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
that's
tons
not
of
where I
arranging
live.
there too.
Yeah, but I think that the type of arranging is more of the Liszt style, which, I'm going to use Liszt here as the archetype of what he's sort of using as the modern term for arrangement, which is that you need to basically think of arrangement as a museum almost thing where you're trying to just capture the essence, not even the essence, you're trying to capture the exactitude of a piece. Berlioz's stuff, for instance, right?
Right.
Well, yes and no, right? Where it is, let me check my notes here. Because he talks about even the different ways that Liszt, so he doesn't go into it in depth, but he talks about that Liszt does refer to transcriptions, arrangements, reductions, and then that Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique, he labels a piano score, right? So again, he doesn't go in depth about like what does Liszt mean when he uses those different words, but it sounded to me like Liszt, and I guess I'm getting off topic now. You're trying to talk about like kind of the archetypical understanding of arranging.
Yeah, because I'm saying whether or not Liszt did that, because I agree. It's like the author talks about how he doesn't think Liszt was actually doing it the way that he was trying to do it, but what he was essentially trying to do was make an exact representation, like an exact translation of Berlioz's symphony, for instance, which can't be done, and is what the author basically is saying. But and this is why I thought he brought up that whole idea of like a museum for music and stuff, and having like people. And again, I mean, Antushka and I had basically somebody come into our music history class and had this whole thing about like the way Bach is supposed to be played and stuff like this. So that's where
you get in trouble with that one guy about?
I got in a debate with him, but I think other people were more. I think we had one friend who I don't remember being that combative with them, but I don't know. Antushka, do you remember me being? I don't
think you were as combative as.
Yeah,
I assume we know who our other friend is. Probably Brother X doesn't know. But.
Yeah.
Well, I remember you saying you got into an argument with a certain person.
This is a real fun conversation.
But about that question of like how are you allowed to interpret a piece of music?
Right.
And in this case, we were talking about, I guess it's technically an arrangement, but it was at least written for the lute, right? Mm-hmm. You were working on one of the lute suites, weren't you?
Oh, I know. No, you're actually talking about something else. Yes. I know.
The key thing. Yeah.
I got like into an argument with somebody because I was
that
playing
was fun at dinner.
The Bach. Yes. I was playing the Bach lute, the 997 in D minor. And somebody was telling me, you should be in C sharp minor, or whatever it was written for lute. And I was like, shut up, dude. You suck.
I'll tell you, whenever I play around midnight, I'm not tuning down to E flat.
Yeah.
I do it in E.
It's such a stupid argument. But anyway, so obviously we know where I feel about this. And Berlioz maybe is even more the archetypal of like it.
Because he was all into the cutting your ear off and all that.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that was crazy.
There were a few quotes in there that I
Andrew, do you want to explain that? The cutting your ear off part?
Oh, yeah, you should explain that.
So Berlioz was talking about the author was talking about how Berlioz was really into the idea of very strict adherence to the authenticity of sort of the true work. And Berlioz, in some of his writings, was even talking about this Chinese practice in opera where if the singer, made too many mistakes or got too far off the intention of the work, they'd get a strict warning, which would include the cutting off of one of their ears, so they knew not to do that for next time.
I think he agreed, though, that then...
It was a little intense.
He said that's fine, but then they would then cut off the second ear if they screwed up again. He was like, that's a bit much, because then how are you going to, sing without any ears? It's like, okay, well, I'm glad he had...
I thought they were going to kill them next. I thought the ear was first and then killing them.
No, it was a double ear move.
It was a double ear? Okay.
Three. You get 3 strikes. One ear, another ear, and then you're dead.
Yeah. And Berlioz, he was around in like the 1830s, I think is when he was big, 1840s. A lot of the people we're talking about are in the early 19th century. And he was known for his Symphonie Fantastique. That's all I remember from him.
He was a one-hit wonder.
He was kind of a one-hit wonder. Yeah,
Come on, we can slander Berlioz.
Yeah, it's true. We can.
He also wrote one of the major orchestration treatises.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, he. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a one-hit wonder for me, but I'm out of the game. Hey, obviously, he's done more.
Can I give a controversial take here?
Sure.
I don't like Symphony Fantastique.
Oh, I hate it. I can't stand it.
Wow, guys, I'm leaving. That's like better than Stairway to Heaven for me, man. No. Anyway, I don't remember thinking anything about it, to be honest.
I think it's really hokey.
Yeah. Well, and so I don't know. It's what it was making me think about. So we did all these episodes on Foucault, and it was interesting because the author was also making this strict idea about how like between 1773 and 18 whatever, like I don't even remember, but he had a date range for when the arrangement started to become, quote, as he calls it, like modernized, and to what you were talking about, where it was like, you're degrading the arrangement. It's trying to sort of capture the original, but it's always second to the original because the original is what you're sort of chasing after, which then it seems like this author is saying, no, it's like anyway, we'll get to that. But it was interesting because he was making this point about how it came up around that time. And Foucault also talks about this kind of idea that there was like I guess you could say rigidization almost of Western society in that period where, this is where you had a lot of the current disciplines come up and you had a lot of the authorities that we think of as authorities now began.
Right.
And there was a lot of, like we talked about Semmelweis too in like the second or third episode, who was that physician who was basically trying to go against the grain of the medical authorities in like 1848. And it was having a really hard time because there was just, for some reason, there was this idea that outside thinking is like you have to be very much in the box. And this is where you have all the definitions of madness then is like, okay, you're a little bit out of the thinking path or whatever, and then we got to bring you back in and we'll put you in an asylum and stuff like that. There was a lot of honing in of, I guess, the society at that time, and it feels like this is kind of the same thing where it's like, no, the arrangement is supposed to be trying to get at the box that is the original, and if you go outside of the original box, then you're crazy.
Well, so I think in terms of, I haven't really thought about how these things fit into sort of the broader context of what else was going on in the world, in philosophy. But from a music perspective, a few things to kind of ground it. I mean, one, like, something that kind of underlies a lot of like discourse in music ontology is like this kind of Platonic notion of what they like what a musical work is, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm probably screwing this up for any music philosophers listening, but like essentially it's sort of like with the allegory of the caves, you know, like it comes out of that, and it's like the work exists here, and then any iteration of it, a performance, the notation, whatever, is like the shadows on the wall that are cast from that, you know. So all of them are imperfect and inexact, but the work exists unto itself in the ethers, and people are just like grasping for it, right? And you can see, I think, that kind of coming up a lot throughout the chapter without him actually talking about it. Mm-hmm. But these different notions of what an arrangement is and how it relates to the original. But in terms of like the sort of strict adherence to things and the boxing in of our notions of what's allowed and what's not, like, you know, there's those concepts of what a work is, but I think within music, like two other things that are happening is like if you're talking about what a work is, writing it down, notating it changes that conception, right? Like at a time when, or styles of music where nobody's writing it down, like there's a different concept of what a work is. And interestingly, I feel like recording doesn't change in the same way that notating does, right? And maybe it's just that implicit understanding that notation is always going to be imperfect, right?
Right.
But like, so when we're getting into the 19th century, obviously they've been writing music for centuries at that point, but you know, a lot of Baroque music, like we still had more like freedom for a performer and improvisation. Mm-hmm. You know, we still had more, and I guess it continued in the 19th century, but like, you know, improvised cadenzas and this and that. But, you know, notation I think was becoming more strict at that point, but also just like big musical personalities, right? And all of a sudden now there's like a person that has to be respected. And I think that boxes in our notions of what's allowed and what's not in a way that didn't exist before. I mean, like, you know, nobody would complain about changing a Vivaldi piece because he was always writing for a different ensemble, right? Like, he didn't have, like, a set thing he was doing. It was working with what he had. But, you know, like, you get to Beethoven and it's like, this is the orchestra, these are the pieces in it, this is what I'm writing, and you know, there was like a different kind of, I think, hierarchy ascribed to like who's an authority when it comes to a piece of music at that point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, sorry, Antushka.
I was just humming.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, and I was going to say, because he makes an interesting point, because, you know, yeah, he's talking, we talked about the modern conception of arrangement, which is basically a degradation of it to, you know, to, as he calls it, yeah, it's either like it's serving
I think
a function.
That's maybe his conception. I don't think that is the conception.
No, it's his conception. Yes. He's defining the modern conception as this degradation of you're always trying to put it second to the original, whether it's just a function to, you know, get whatever like you just need it to be on piano for some purpose, like to like in an orchestra. So you're doing it for that. But before that, he was making this point, and, you know, you brought up Vivaldi, right? So it's making me think of the Baroque idea. Yeah, there was all of this. There's a lot more room for improvisation. You would improv like people wouldn't write in all the ornamentations. You would just do them. And it's interesting because he's talking about how that was sort of preserved in Italy during this time too, though, right? With the opera singers, and which is kind of interesting too, which then does kind of make me think it's a Germanic thing, you know, because I mean, honestly, I have order.
I was about to say it, but I knew you would.
Anyway, yeah, because I mean, all the authority stuff you're talking about, I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah, anyway, I just need to get that out there. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. You guys disagree, though, I assume, with sort of the conception of, I mean, Antushka, I wanted you to sort of just lay into Berlioz, basically.
Lay into You said that, and I'm reading it, and it's like, well, first of all, he's old enough that I really don't care.
Come on.
Like, it's not like anything that Berlioz does makes me angry.
It should.
Other than I don't like Symphony Fantastique. And
he's
his use of the
Berlioz
DSE
wrote
ray
make me laugh.
is kind of like ham-fisted. But
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's stupid. I think the idea of the being able to capture the essence of a work to the degree where you should be punishing other people for not doing it is absurd on its face for multiple reasons. One, it doesn't matter, and I always think that this is really funny that when people go and hear music, they have a specific set of sounds that they really, really want to hear. And if they hear other sounds, they get very angry. Mm-hmm. So, they want this note. And if you play this note instead, it really frustrates them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's sort of funny. Like, that's kind of amusing to me as a thing. But then on the other side, the idea that it is possible to attain access to whatever some like urtext, some true essence of a piece, to me is kind of, it's a strange idea, and it's difficult for me to lay into Berlioz because the problem is I feel like we're kind of looking at an earlier culture that is very different from how I currently engage with music and probably how the three of us engage with music, and so it doesn't make me that angry because I don't feel like it's forcing me to do any of that stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But don't you see the croppings?
Very grounded of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but screw Berlioz.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have his book on my bookshelf.
I mean, but to the point of like just the absurdity of like trying to capture the essence or like perfectly recreate it. Like that's what I like about this concept of an arrangement is just hearing with somebody else's ears. And again, I think even that oversimplifies the different functions of arranging. But like, let's just take arrangement for the sake of artistic excitement, right? I hear a piece of music, I want to play it now myself, but it's not written for my instrument, and so I play it differently, right? Even if I'm not sitting there like really thinking about it, processing it, all that, like I'm gonna make decisions about like what was important about that song when I heard it, and can I still recreate that in some way? It's not necessarily the essence of the piece, but it's like, what about that piece resonated with me, and can I still give that to somebody else when I play it? Like,
and it's probably at least partially what you feel the essence is, because the things that you're going to keep in and the things that you're going to cut out are going to be sort of things that you deem as essential to the best of your ability on your instrument.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Like if you're playing a blues
that piece
tune,
cannot exist in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, that's what I really like about it. That was my big takeaway from 30 pages. But and I think that though too is it, for me, like that's what's interesting about now. Like, let's step away from the academic world of arranging and transcription and orchestration and reduction, and let's talk about like musical like let's talk about cover songs, and let's talk about like sampling and stuff like that. There it's still like, to me, and this is where I think it's cool, is like you're talking about somebody who liked a song and wanted to play it. And even if now it's like, I probably can't say his name, but I always want to say people's names. What do I call you, brother? No, Mr. X.
Mr. X.
Mr. X. That friend of mine who shares a name with you and is a big goofball. Like, I would make fun of them because every time he would do a cover for a period of time, he always just had the same strum pattern because it was just like his signature strum pattern. It was just like, it was his default. So like stuff like that, it has nothing to do with his inherent view of the essence of that song. It's just how he plays. But still, like, there's something about that song that he liked. There's a reason he's playing it. and he's got to be satisfied on some level with how he's playing, or he probably would stop at some point, right?
Right.
So is he capturing something there, right?
Right.
And now again, we're just getting into that realm of like, well, this is how he hears it, you know, and now it's translated into his.
And it isn't even always how you hear it. It also could be how you want to hear it.
Ooh.
Like I've been doing this
Are
version
those the same thing?
of "Come Together" by the Beatles, which I consider an arrangement. I do a completely different groove. I do a funk groove under it.
Wait, are you allowed to say Beatles on this podcast?
So this
Keep it
one
anonymous,
famous rock group in
the
the history
Named
of rock and
after
roll
an,
that
an
probably a lot of
arthropod.
people know, but we shouldn't say the name.
We shouldn't say the name. Yeah.
Anyway, but that was a decision I made. I consider it arrangement because to me it has the essence of the song, whatever that means. But
It has something in the song that you like that you still want to maintain.
but there are
right?
large scale structural changes. Like to me, what's sort of confusing about this chapter is that there's these words that are sort of hard words to pin down, because arrangement and transcription, translation, reduction, all of these things, they're words that I have general ideas for what they mean, but even when I was in music school, it is a little bit difficult to tell
So,
when to use which one.
all right, I think I can actually help with that.
Nice.
All right, so transcription, and this is like reasonably well established, even though he doesn't go into it in this book and uses terms sometimes interchangeably. But transcription is like when you are trying to be as note for note as possible.
Right.
Arrangement, it's not that you're taking liberties, but the nature of the change of instruments requires you to make more modifications that you're trying to make with fidelity, right? Reduction is simply a piece for a larger ensemble put onto a smaller instrument or ensemble, and you're literally reducing what's happening. And orchestration is the reverse, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's like, generally speaking, how those terms are used.
So then what
about
I'm talking about
translation?
doesn't fit into any of those categories.
What about translation? Do they use that in the musical context? I mean, he
No.
was obviously making the analogy
He
with
was
translation.
making the analogy, yeah. They don't. Let me. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can find this. There was a group I used to follow. It was like a reading group in the UK. They called themselves Tarot. I don't think they exist anymore, so I don't know if I can find it. But like, there were two T's. There was like transcription and something, and a T for transcription, A for arrangement, R for, I think, reproduction, reduction, O for orchestration, and I don't know what the other T was for. But like, there's a lot of words that are used. Like you can use, again, like reproduction, I mean, musical quotation, again, I like to talk about cover songs, sampling's a whole thing where we're talking about taking inspiration from a work and then doing something with it at varying levels of a spectrum of how much originality you're adding to it,
Right.
Well,
Or
so
like,
it's
what about a jazz rendition of a classic, like Broadway tune or something?
Yeah, I think that stuff is really interesting to
It's
me.
not really an arrangement. It's just what is that?
I think they would call it an arrangement, but academically, it's maybe not written down in the way an arrangement ought to be,
Right.
But no, I think that stuff's really interesting, and not even an arrangement, but when you take any standard like played by a jazz quartet, like it can take on a lot of different iterations. I think in a similar sense to when he was describing I guess more the adherence to the performer in 19th century Italian opera, right? Where the performer had more creative control than even a composer. You wouldn't call it a new work, but it could take on a totally different form.
Right.
Well, so it's interesting because when I was reading that part, so he's specific. He makes this interesting analogy with translations, with language, as sort of getting to his point about how you can't really ever get at the original work, but a translation is, if anything, it's just trying to get at the ideal of what I guess you could say, is trying to be communicated, and the translator is having as much of a part of that as the sort of original author. It was making me think of, in DNA replication. And, you know, so anyway, so yeah, so anybody that has taken science is going to learn about transcription and translation. And transcription is you're basically taking DNA and turning it into RNA, which is kind of similar to DNA. And then translation is you're then taking that RNA and turning it into protein, which is, you know, and then the function. So it's interesting, though, because it was just trying to make me think about this. I can definitely see how transcription, as you were saying, it's more of a note-for-note thing. There's less, you're trying to preserve more of the information. But then once you go from, you know, a sort of completely different molecule, nucleic acids to amino acids in the case of DNA, RNA, and protein, then it is, I mean, it does feel like this bigger jump. So I guess that's maybe what the point is. It is all of these, they're all on a spectrum of getting away from, I guess you could say, the original, but there's
how
like
far
different,
away,
how far away are you going from it? And I guess I just wanted to say that, and then also kind of wanted to work into the copyright stuff, because that's where I think we probably feel this idea most, is whether or not arrangement is dead. It does seem like the copyright is trying to hold back, you know, arrangement to the best of they can, or whatever you want to call it. All of the, you know, differences that you can take a piece. And I mean, it begs the question to me is like, is this an argument against copyright? And that's kind of why I was not completely being facetious when I said, can you summarize the book or contextualize the chapter in the book? Because I saw that the first chapter is about copyright. So it's like,
more of it is about copyright.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't do that is that I've read this book, but I read the whole book
a while ago, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. Well, so, and we don't have to get into what his opinion is then, but if you remember sort of some of it, you know, but not to put you on the spot, because, you know, we didn't prepare for that. But yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting idea, because honestly, I was telling Antushka, we've been getting into property, I would say. That was what we started to get into in the last episode, actually. And we sort of...
we should have started with chapter 1.
Well, I was actually thinking about saying that, but I like this chapter still, though.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think this might be a good time to sort of at least get some of our thoughts out about that. And so I can start. I mean, yeah, I know. I mean, for me, I have a hard time with it because it's like I'm not trying to make money off of my music right now. I mean, I'm not trying to do it professionally. So I like to say that, you know, I don't care as much about, like, if somebody were to cover my songs, I'm not going to probably try to sue them. But I get the idea, whereas if this is all that you have, you know, I get that idea. But then there's also the idea of how much should you actually get for an original piece, too, is like, you know what I mean? Is like, is there actually no cap to the amount of money that you should make from, I guess, a residual off of a piece? I don't know. And so I'm just asking more questions and not saying what my opinion is, because I guess I'm I've said it a little bit. I think I'm a little bit libertine about arrangement, I guess, is the idea, because I think for the exact reasons.
That's a fun way of putting it.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I mean, because
I've never felt that modern copyright law, and I know there's some ridiculous cases in the news of, you know, it's not even arranging, it's, you know, getting into plagiarism and what constitutes plagiarism, right? But I've never felt that copyright law as it exists today inhibits arrangement.
I think that this is where the academic world is very different than the commercial world.
I think it does inhibit.
Cover songs.
No, but it definitely inhibits. I mean,
well,
you have way
cover
more
songs are like if you're a cover band, like a professional cover band, you have to pay licensing fees, and every venue that exists, if they want to have music played at all, have to pay licensing fees to BMI and ASCAP, and all
yeah,
but even to have the radio playing.
But they all do, or they don't, right? You know what I mean?
But it gets into this question of like all these things. It's like, you know, oligarchy. Who are these people that are getting this money? How much is actually going to the artists, right? And
well,
how much
I mean,
is going
in
to
that
middle
case,
people?
actually, and I'm not saying like a lot of artists are getting rich off of it. It depends on who you are and how much people are covering your music. But like a lot of that money does go to artists.
The big ones, sure.
Right.
Sure.
Because they're the ones whose songs people are covering, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, and this is the point of how social media, I think, I wonder if you didn't have copyright, I do think that you would probably see many more covers on Spotify being released and everything. And it's already happening. It's just people are doing it illegally, right? More people, myself included.
But releasing on Spotify a cover?
Yes.
What's preventing people from doing that?
Well, Spotify disincentive, you have to pay more. And you don't get as you don't get as much money for it, and I think there's an extra fee.
Right,
yeah, and
the
there's an extra step. That's the disincentivization. I mean, the point is, it's disincentivizing
it's not
me.
just step,
Hang on.
it's also money.
I'm the example. This is the reason I don't do it, because I'm like, it's just too much hassle. I don't want to go through all this, it's like that, and I get it. It's kind of a lazy approach, but I'm just saying that's just the honest to God's truth, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way. And again, I'm not saying this is a life or death thing, right? It's like, I'm going to be fine if I can't, put a cover on Spotify or whatever. But I'm just saying it's an interesting idea because for the reasons that this person is basically saying. He's taking the stand that an arrangement is sort of a work in of itself that's getting at some ideal work that, the original and the arrangements lie under and are all sort of... it's a maturation process too, as he was saying, which is where he was going with the idea from translation. Is like every time a translator translates a piece of work into a new language, they're sort of reviving it, and they're changing the message a little bit because they're giving it the perspective of whatever that group and that language is. And you could say that's the same thing about covers. And so this is, I would say, the reason you might want to incentivize more people to do covers is for that reason of getting things canonized, because that's the way it happens, is things are canonized by other people covering them, and then they just become part of the canon. And if you disincentivize people from doing these covers, you're actually, in some sense, I think, hurting yourself in the larger setting, because... I
think a distinction needs to be drawn, though, between disincentivizing people doing the covers and disincentivizing people releasing them on a platform.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, but if you are doing it in anonymity, it is going to be harder for it to be canonized, because the whole idea is that
it's not just anonymity. I guess I'm even thinking about, like, any guitar student that picks up an instrument and says, I want to learn this song now. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily like they're making a cover of it, but I guess, like... Right.
But there actually can be legal problems with that. It doesn't usually happen with rock songs, but especially Disney, because Disney doesn't allow fair use, including for instructional use of any of their content. And so, yes, obviously, in a one-on-one guitar lesson, probably it's no problem. But that doesn't mean it's not. It is illegal, and there are teachers who've gotten in trouble in classroom settings for showing Disney content.
I didn't know that, but thank you.
There's I work with somebody in the Georgetown ISD, the school district in Georgetown, Texas. He was saying that every now and then they have a teacher that makes a mistake and puts like a little Disney thing on one of their online classroom like things, and they'll get a cease and desist order that's like, this has been up for 10 days and it's $1,000 a day. It's just like,
yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing, is there is and again, though, I mean, and this is why I think I want to sort of delve more into property, because I'm not saying that property isn't sort of important, and I need to honestly form some more solid opinions about it, because...
I'll say this. I think that's an interesting conversation to have. I would argue that's a little bit off topic for tonight, because that's not the chapter we read.
Well, but this is the thing, though, is I think it's getting at that, because it's asking about what is acceptable, I guess, when you're talking about an original piece. And the idea of copyright is that you're copying the original piece. But again, this person in this chapter is saying it's actually not the original. It stands aside.
I mean, when he's saying that, he's making a philosophical statement.
Well, but still, I mean, philosophy can be used in practice.
So
I understand that,
points.
but there is a distinction between philosophy.
Well, he's using it in practice here, though. I mean, he's talking about concrete
But it's a
examples.
philosophical statement. He's not saying that it should be then regulated in that fashion.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. He's not taking it there, but I'm saying this seems pretty obvious of how it's related. This is just how Brother X. I used his name.
But you could have been talking about somebody else. You could have taken that. So this is how.
I was just saying this is our childhood right here.
We're gonna have to bleep it.
I understand it's related, right? I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think it's a leap to say that he would say that it should be regulated in that way.
Well, yeah, I don't know what
because he doesn't
would
say that. You know what I mean?
I'm not saying he would say that. I'm saying he seems to be, his arguments that he's laying down here, though, appear to help that argument, though.
Sure.
Yeah. But yes, he hasn't obviously made that connection here, and again, I don't know how he feels about copyright. But anyway, okay, fine. You want to get back to it?
Okay.
See, I was just saying, this is the childhood.
There were two things
right
that I
here.
thought were worth discussing that are sort of internal to the chapter.
Take it, Antushka. Save us.
One was his bit about Busoni at the end, where he was writing about how writing down sort of even the text of the work itself is already an arrangement, and the composer themselves is arranging their original idea, which is interesting because I had that same thought earlier in the chapter, because talking about sort of the tree of the idea, and you have the work, and then you have an arrangement of the work. And then there seemed to be several times where I was kind of getting lost in the timeline, because there was this eternally unrealized work idea that I would never really was able to grasp.
Yeah, he never really quite got there.
About.
But maybe that was the point.
That's the Platonic notion of like music ontology and what a work is.
Right.
And it's I don't know, like those discussions, and this is why I like talking about arrangement. Those discussions always piss me off. Like when you get too deep down the rabbit hole of philosophy, you're talking about nothing.
Right.
And I don't like that's overly simplistic, but you're talking about things that at some point stop relating to real life, right? And the reason I like talking about arrangement is like if you want to have those discussions of like what a work is, and and is everything an arrangement of it, like that, like it's like putting your money where your mouth is. It's like, all right, well, when you do an arrangement, when you do a composition, like you're putting something on paper that we can.
Right.
I shouldn't even say on paper, but you're putting something out there that we can hear or we can look at. And now we have something practical to talk about. And the reason I like talking about something practical is that you can make you can like sit here and use all this flowery like circular language and these things where you're getting lost in the timeline. I'm getting lost in I don't know, like there are a lot of places where you can get lost in those chapters. When you're talking about actually writing or actually arranging, you're making real decisions that I think have nothing to do with those assumptions at times. And I think that's what's interesting but also messy about trying to make waterproof philosophical statements, is that real life is always going to fuck it up. Can I swear on this podcast?
You can.
Yes.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Real life is always going to fuck it up, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to sit there and say, I want to play this song, and I think it should sound like this on the guitar because this is what I think the essence of the piece is, and this is what I think the composer was trying to say. And then I could say, well, you know what? Like, I can't play that. It's not physically possible, or it's not even possible for me. I'm not fast enough, whatever, right? And so now I change it. So now that has nothing to do with my philosophical view.
That isn't even your hearing.
That's not even my hearing.
Yep.
That's just like my physical abilities.
Yep.
Or like I was talking about with that friend of mine, he'll do a cover song, and I don't know how he hears the piece. He's got that strum pattern he's going to fall into.
It'd be great if he does actually hear that strumming pattern in every piece of music.
Right, but
he's
he
like,
probably
there it
doesn't. It's just what he does, and not only are those things okay and legitimate, but I like that they have nothing to do with how I might want to define it philosophically,
Right. But the same things are true when composing.
Yes.
The same snags happen. You're writing for trumpet, and that note isn't possible on a trumpet. Or I'm writing for a player that can't do that. Or I do want to do that, but in this context, that's not going to make any sense, or whatever. The practicalities of life get in the way. And then there's some composers who specifically rebel against that idea and will write things that are impossible on purpose so as to, preserve the work, whatever that means.
What's his name?
Schoenberg?
Rodrigo.
No, not Schoenberg.
Rodrigo.
Oh, he did that?
He's got all those pieces in guitar music where it's like, here's a 10-note chord. I know it's not possible, but I'm going to let you decide what notes to get rid of.
I mean, that's kind of fun. Leaving it up to the performer is neat. I mean, even crazier than that. I mean, writing things that are something about the conception of the work. It has to be, an 11 tuplet under a 13 tuplet, and it has to be 4 octaves below, going to 5 octaves above, and then you have to smash a bottle on your head, and then you have to call the police.
When did you write that song?
Guys, this is my latest tune.
Yeah.
I really hope you like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to play it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think that's a good point about the philosophy and the practicalities of it. That was kind of what I was thinking during a lot of the chapter, and I think I noticed the beginnings of his points were all very cool. Right. And then as he starts explaining them, it's like, wow, I wish you hadn't explained that. I think I had it.
So here's another thing. I don't know if you guys thought about this, but not only throughout the whole thing, but especially when he gets into the part literally talking about translation. He wrote this fucking book in French.
Yeah,
right?
no, that
We're
makes...
reading a translation.
I was actually just thinking about that because I knew that he was French, and I was reading it like it was like Foucault again, honestly.
Yeah.
I did. I also thought Foucault when we were reading.
Yes,
it kind of reminds me.
And so maybe this is just an issue when you try to translate French into English, honestly.
Right.
There you go.
Should we talk about you had another thing,
well, actually,
right?
I two things. The translation, since we're on the translation. He made this point a couple times that you can't translate a translation.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes zero sense to me.
I totally disagree.
Because, I mean, even if you think about the history of biblical translation, there's the King James, that big project that took like 600 years. And then most modern translations, English translations of the Bible, are based on the King James translation.
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand what it means is you can't translate a translation.
I think it's
the other thing I thought of...
Wait, I think I know, though. I mean... I think it's the same idea that we're getting back, is that any time you take something from one medium to another, whether it's even a different language, if it's just a different person, you can't have anything that's the same thing. That's kind of what I took from this whole thing, is you'll never have a copy. And in that sense, everything stands, shoulder to shoulder.
Another concept that I didn't quite get, but I think this is what he meant. He used the word plastic a lot, both in talking about arrangements, but also talking about translation. And my understanding was that an original is dynamic, and then the translation or the arrangement is more static, right?
Well, I think
but when he's saying that it canonizes it, it fixes it.
Right.
Right? By saying this is one... It's like if you have a sculpture... And you're saying, like, the sculpture, you can look at it from all these different angles. Now each arrangement is a different angle at it. So it's fixed there now at that angle. And for that arrangement, you can only see it from that angle. And it's not that you can't
Right, he even talks
it,
about triangulating, right?
Yeah.
Well, Okay, maybe he's saying that, but I guess I would disagree. And I honestly still got more of the impression that he was taking what was it, Benjamin's philosophy about things as again, it's different. It's not the same. It's just different, and it's not less than or greater than. It's just something that's working in tandem with the original towards the Platonic ideal, the capital W work.
Yes. Werk, I believe it's pronounced.
The Werk. Should we talk about the 10? We got to talk about 10 at some point.
About 10?
We opened with it.
A simpler question I had. Well, I don't know if it's a simple question.
Before we get off that idea of not being able to translate translators, Mr. X, you have a few of, I think, my books that what I like about that translator, Stephen Mitchell, do you remember that name? Mm-hmm. What I like about that translator, so Stephen Mitchell is a translator. He's translated a lot of particularly religious works like the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Job, all kinds of stuff. And the thing I like about his translations is most of what he translates, he does not actually speak the original language. He works from as many different translations as he can to try to then, this idea of triangulating via these different viewpoints to then come up with, how does this make sense to me and how can I communicate it in plain English? And so his translations read, to me, really easily, and I kind of love that concept of just that he is translating translations,
Right.
Literally, like that's what he does.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
I like that process.
I didn't realize
and it reminds me of like when I played the Chaconne, to get back to Bach.
Oh, yeah. Dude, you looked at so many different types.
Yeah, I've worked through a lot of different, like, not only did I listen to different violinists play it, but as many different guitarists as I could. I've got, like, a few different score copies of arrangements, and now I just play it my way. Right. But it's like an amalgamation of all these different versions of it. And it's actually really fun to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
No, that's interesting. I didn't realize that guy took that approch either.
Yeah, you should read his prefaces. He talks about it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's funny. I have a lot of your books, I think. Yeah. So, Antushka, did you have another small question you were saying?
Oh, well, it's just about
question.
the word critical, but I'm thinking about arranger. I'm thinking about what you're talking about sort of the compilation of different translations, and then translation, because he was also relating the word translation to music and talking about not being able to translate the letter, and I wasn't able to quite grasp the distinction, was exactly meant by the letter, but also saying that it doesn't correlate one-to-one with music, the idea of literary translation. But I think if we think in a less philosophical sense and we zoom out in a more practical sense, I think we can get that idea much more clearly. In that, if somebody plays a phrase on the guitar and somebody else has a piano, they can play it back. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. Trying to play back a vocal melody can be a little tricky, because the way that you sing something, even if you are singing individual notes, it doesn't sound the same as the way individual notes sound on a piano or on a guitar. Yeah. But you can figure it out. And so, they sing a melody and then you play it back. And you're going to play it back in a slightly different way because you're on a different instrument, or you could say speaking a different language. And that's one way of having kind of the metaphor go across. Or, you could move it into minor, or move it into a different key, or move it into a different... Yeah. You could move it into an octatonic system or a 12-tone system or whatever. However you want to think of the translation. But I think that from a practical sense, you can see how music could be transmitted from medium or sort of thought collection.
So I think... Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think for me, the way I understood this idea of translating the letter versus the meaning what I understood was if you take a vocal melody and you play it back note for note on the guitar,
Right.
you're translating the letter there, but you might not be getting at the meaning.
Sure.
Whereas you could now say, when they sing this, it sounds, feels, whatever, hits in a certain way, and now you play it, but maybe you're missing a few notes or bending a note, or you're doing something that's more guitaristic now, but you're not playing exactly note for note.
Right.
And now you're translating the meaning versus the letter.
Yes.
That's how I understood that distinction.
Yep. So
does
actually,
this
I do that.
Yeah.
I play.
You're a
what's,
meaning man.
what's a tune that I play a lot? Clint Eastwood, The Gorillas.
Okay.
You know, there's
Yeah.
that little like whistle melody.
Yep.
I always do it on the guitar, but I've never like learned it truly. So I'm always just like winging it by ear. And so I just do it in kind of like
believe it's
an
pronounced
extra
wanging
guitar-y way. Yeah, right. Vinging.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Jesus.
But right, it kind of feels like translating.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, is this getting at that critical moment of listening? Kind of?
I
'Cause
don't know.
Yeah.
Take us there.
Well,
Critical.
'cause
That was my question. What does critical mean? This word is used all the time. This is the most confusing word of all time to me.
I don't know. It's French.
Well, because there's like critique, which is related, criticize, a critical listening, a critical thought. I don't know what
When he
these
literally
things are.
talks about music criticism.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, on page 60, he's saying, and similar between my selected extracts and you, I am there with my machines, with my listeners' instruments prolonging my ears, with my body equipped. And from me to you, we begin now to turn to the work, and its listening into an experience. To hear hearing. It is from this reduplication that something like a critical moment of listening arises. So the reason I bring this up is because it seems to me that this is getting at that idea of how everything is going to ultimately be different because, as you keep saying, is everybody, like even the listener is taking a part in getting at what the meaning is because everybody's going to experience it with their own ears differently and then thus going to feel things differently. And so that's what I took. And the critical, I guess, is just maybe giving the emphasis that this is the where the sort of meaning occurs for music is in the act of listening to it. Maybe I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would buy that.
Yeah, between Beethoven and me, there is Liszt, the listener, because he's talking about Liszt's arrangement of Beethoven,
Right.
reinscribing his listenings for the piano, and I listen to him listening. Just like you had said with your, when you arrange things, you're showing the people what you're honing in on.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, again, and I know you don't want to talk about private property, but it does seem to then
How about
get at this
public
idea of, well, it's just everybody is having a part to play in the experience of experiencing music. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever, man. You guys are just a bunch of Debbie Downers.
I'm just not ready for it right now.
I know. I forget. So, yeah, this is the thing about Brother X. Brother X, you need things very tidy. You might say you're a little Germanic in this sense.
All right, yeah.
I mean, I think also, though, my perspectives on property, I think, are probably, maybe not. My assumption is wildly unhelpful because they're, like, radically different.
Well,
we can talk about, like, I guess I'd be curious, are we having a conversation about our personal views, or are we having a conversation about what's practical under the letter of the law based on how the laws
it's really
actually
just
are?
anything because it's more of just
question.
I think that this is getting at this very, again, philosophical question of like what constitutes ownership over a piece of music. Is it the creators? And it's like it seems like no, it's not just the creators because of the example that he's just saying.
Well,
is the
I
listener
mean, to that point, though, it's
Yes.
like if I do a cover song, like I do still have some ownership of it.
some?
Yeah,
Yes, some.
yeah.
not all.
Should I?
I don't know. Maybe not, because of the points that are being raised here. And this is
I think Plato should have ownership
of all the songs.
Over everything.
Yes, of course. He's in the cave.
Sure. We're all in the cave, let's be honest. Yeah. And again, because you're talking about not wanting to talk about philosophical, like going too deep in, but I'm sort of saying this to me feels like what the implications of all the philosophy he's laying down in here. And that's why I keep taking it there.
What's the implication?
The implication is that, the composer doesn't have full ownership over a piece.
Well, once the cover is created, they don't. I mean, they have ownership still over their piece, but they don't have full ownership over the cover.
Yeah,
they have. Well, depending on how the. Are we talking about are we talking about Beethoven, or are we talking about a modern composer?
We could talk about
any of them, I guess.
Because I think it's different. Because a modern composer, depending on how the licensing works,
if there were 100 years,
like Universal has complete ownership of that music.
I'm getting
the cover band has zero ownership of that music.
Yeah. But when you in that modern context, a cover band isn't like publishing music and making money off that. Mm-hmm. They're giving performances and they're collecting mechanical royalties on recordings, and they do profit from those, and in that way they do share in ownership of it. So the royalties that work exists in a performance.
Right. The royalties on recordings would be like an agreement they'd come to with whoever licenses it. And
basically,
and their live performance, that would be like their individual labor, sure.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the listeners should be paid too.
Right. Yeah, we got to really expand this intellectual property bit.
A critical role.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
critical.
Jesus.
That word confuses me. So that word has confused me for years.
All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this, an arrangement, if you will, and I'm going to replace the word critical with the word X, and we're going to see how it reads, okay?
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
All right.
Should we talk about the 10 stuff? I mean, this was honestly very confusing, to be honest. It's on page 62.
It's kind of flowery.
Yeah.
I feel like whoever is in the mood to wax poetic about it.
Oh, well, I'm always in the mood for that. Well, you know what's interesting about this chapter generally is I would say going into it, from my remembering of music history, I had a more positive idea of Liszt than I did Schumann, whatever. I never even cared enough to learn how to pronounce his name.
Perspective on Liszt from this chapter?
A little bit. Because
really?
It's like, because I'm like, all right, he didn't really have a backbone when it came to this kind of stuff. Again, I think he should have been more overt in what he was obviously doing, and what the author shows is that he was sort of degrading his arrangement by saying like, oh, and trying to basically do it in as much of the style of Beethoven while, preserving as much of it. But in reality, he failed.
The Liszt piano reductions of Beethoven 70s are like the most famous piano reductions of all time.
Yeah, that's fine. But again, I'm just saying I was disappointed with the fact that he thought that he was doing something different than he obviously ended up doing. Because as you're saying, they stand on their own, right? And this is the point, as it also felt like when I thought about Liszt, I thought of him as like this quintessential romantic guy, right? He was the he's got, when you listen to a Liszt piece, you're like, this is obviously from the 19th century. He almost embodies it. But then when I hear him talk about this, and it's interesting because it seems like this is also a 19th century mentality of just staying in the lines, essentially, is what it felt like he kept saying. And I never got that conception. And honestly, I kind of got that conception more from Schumann. I'm just telling you, I'm not saying I was right. This is just how...
I kind of got the sense that he was saying that Liszt was... I mean, with the piano reductions, Liszt wasn't really doing arrangements.
I mean, okay. Well, so I'll just finish the point though. With Schumann though, and he was a music critic, so I was always like, okay, I don't like critics.
But you gained respect for Schumann in this chapter.
Yes, that's the point.
Okay,
I gained respect for Schumann, but then maybe lost it when the author went into all this 10 muse thing, which I guess was the reason I brought him up. Because on page 62, he's talking about this piece that Schumann had, which, and then I guess he ended up naming it Opus 10, right? Or Opus X.
Yep.
And then the author is basically making this whole idea that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because Schumann wasn't actually doing this. Okay, so Schumann continues.
Convinced by the publisher.
I looked at the X, the opus number 10, that has now become a Roman numeral and a capital letter, as the sign of the unknown greatness, the X, and the composition as authentically Paganinian. And
say the German.
Yeah.
Eine echt Paganini.
Yeah, but in silence, I looked at the number X, for I am not yet at the 9th muse, as the sign of unknown greatness, the X. This parentheses is complex. And so the idea is the muses, daughters of Zeus, are, we know, 9 in number. They traditionally represent the division of the liberal arts. And so now Schumann has projected this division and difference in the arts onto the 9 symphonies of Beethoven. So it's basically getting at this idea that 10 is this ideal. I guess,
but we know that he loved all that numerology stuff. And remember when we talked about him adding names and stuff secretly into his he liked little music tricks.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. Yeah, I've basically blacked out most of music history, it seems, or blocked out. I was blacked out and thus blocked out most of music history.
Kind of hard to imagine.
I got an A though. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Based on Paganini, how can we not see lurking between these discrete lines of Schumann's on his arrangement based on Paganini the ghost of an impossible 10th, as if forbidden in advance by the famous 9th, Beethoven's 9th?
This is just the author
no, I know, but
feeding into Schumann's silly stuff. Schumann was just nerdy and into numerology and stuff.
Yeah. The post 9th, 9 plus 1. It was the impossible and the endlessly unfinished task of this musical romanticism.
He was a superstitious weirdo.
Yeah. What would come afterwards was the unknown, the X,
he went crazy.
Small or great.
He ended up in an insane asylum.
Well, they all did, because they all had tuberculosis or syphilis or, whatever,
It was a rough time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
I think you're giving Liszt a hard time.
Me? Yeah, you seem pretty offended by that.
What about Schumann? No, I think the hard time is fine. I think Schumann was silly about that stuff.
No, and by the way, I'm not saying that I like Schumann more than Liszt.
Yes, you
are. I'm not, actually, because, of course, I've never really listened to a Schumann piece. I've listened to Liszt. Yeah. I'll be honest, though, not a huge fan of Liszt. I mean, it's a little bit too flowery. You know what? Now you got me going. You know what? Screw Liszt. All right, no. But, sorry. Okay, let me sit down.
All right.
Okay.
I've got a surprise. I also have him off camera.
Mr. X, why did you... It's the unknown. Wow. Mr. X. Did we already put that together?
We did.
Okay.
That was how we started.
Remember. Oh, yeah, that's right. I've already blocked that out, too.
You're blacking out all kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, so... Okay, so that's fine. I just thought we should explain where all that X talk came from.
I also want to defend Stokowski a little bit.
Okay. Wait.
He's kind of unfair to him right off the bat.
Oh, just that
he's got that little quote, which that sounds to me like it was like a pre-concert interview kind of quote.
Yeah, I was gonna say you take one quote from a person.
It's just one of those things where there's certain contexts where you say something silly about a piece because you're talking to people who don't know that much about it.
And now music. Somebody's talking about it,
And then a musicologist takes it and starts tearing it apart. And you're like, well, that's not really.
Actually, can you remind me what that was about? I don't remember that.
They're talking about the Stokowski's arrangement of the toccata
Oh,
fugue
that's
in D
right.
minor.
Bach staccato, the organ.
And Stokowski talks about how he really just like wants to bring Bach to the masses and make sure that people who
Right.
don't have an organ have a chance to listen to it. Just
Right.
something silly. Like it's too silly of a quote for me to believe that that's a very
Well,
deep thought about it.
But at the same time, like, I don't think it's even overly. I mean, his point, the author, the reason he's like kind of poo-pooing that quote is, you know, he uses it as a point to say, this is what people used to regard arrangement for. It was to transmit a piece of music, right? Like they brought orchestral music into the parlor via piano reduction, right? And now Stokowski is saying he's doing the same with organ music by bringing it to where people hear music in the orchestra hall.
Right.
And the author's then saying, like, well, this is completely ridiculous. Of course that's not true. We had recordings at this time. They could easily go listen to the organ recording. But, you know, it's still... And actually, so I think this is where, like... This is actually where I think the conversation could dovetail in a more interesting fashion into cover songs, right? Because why does somebody do a cover? We can hear the original. You might even be able to go hear the artist.
Right.
But it's because they like it, maybe their fans like it, and then in some cases, like, the fans will like it more because they like that artist as opposed to the original artist, you know?
Right.
So and in some cases, it might have nothing to do with anything, but
It might have
just
to do
like,
with the fact that you're booked for 3 hours.
yeah.
You just need some more songs.
And you've got to play Gorillas,
Yeah, you've got to.
even though you didn't learn it.
Yeah,
That is a pretty good song.
Yeah,
pretty good.
I'm not knocking it.
Yeah,
But no,
Well-
I agree. Like, it's taking a quote out of context, but he was also using that quote as a foil, like, for
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
his own purposes, you know?
Yeah.
but that
And I
also
didn't
feels a little like to be a little snide about somebody if you're using it for your
I
own
didn't think he was
purposes
being
like that feels a
snide,
little-
though. Did you think he was being snide? I guess he was using it as an example of how people view arrangement in the time, maybe.
Well, the time, like the 60s?
Yeah.
Well, he says, like, he lists the quote, and then his next sentences are, it's strange that in 1962, during the era of mass recording, Stokowski can declare that in order to spread Bach's organ work, we have to pass it through a transcription
All right.
for orchestra.
Yeah, it's a
Strange,
little
too, for our
snide.
ears paralyzed by authenticity that he can think he transmitted with such swollen orchestration
he's,
the
like,
same
dunking on
impression
this
as
guy.
the original. He is, yeah.
All right. Fair enough. I guess I don't know. I just must have
R.I.P.
skimmed that.
Stokowski.
Like,
Yeah.
how about the real answer is that he was commissioned to by Disney for Fantasia? Come on. And he had to come up with a soundbite.
Well, you know, so even that I thought was a little interesting, like, you know, because he follows it up, like, how can Stokowski talk about authenticity with this, you know, quote, swollen impression? One was reminded more of Hollywood or of Disney. You know, in fact, it is this orchestration that Stokowski directed for the track of the famous Fantasia. Of course we're going to hear it as Disney-esque. That's how we know it. They didn't know it when
Like, I
they
think it's
first
not the dunk he thinks it is. He's like,
Yeah.
like post hoc dunking on the guy.
Post hoc dunking.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I completely missed that. That's funny. I didn't read it like that at all.
I hope people make it this far to learn about post hoc dunking.
It's always
That's
the
amazing.
end where all the good
I love
stuff
that.
happens. We
I
should
love
talk
Would that
about
be the
Reddit
title? I got to think about titles from here. There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah. Oh, I got invited. So I've been posting our stuff on Reddit and getting a lot of angry response.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
if
really?
if you don't
it's
mind,
pretty
if
funny.
we,
Yeah, curious your opinion. But actually, I got
Yeah.
invited to I got a private invite to a Reddit political debate group.
oh, is it
really?
the same one? I wonder that I got invited to one too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, maybe everybody in some group did.
I don't know. Well, I told you about it a little while ago, but yeah, I don't know if it's the same one. It doesn't matter. Yeah, who cares? But yeah, no, I mean, actually, and I mean, if you got to run, we'll understand. But we like to sort of end by talking about some of our Reddit escapades, so to speak.
Okay. I don't have any Reddit escapades.
Oh no, it's okay. You can just
Okay.
laugh at the sort of absurdity of the Reddit responses. Because, yeah, Antushka's gotten into, is actually very good at sort of sparking debate on Reddit. I'm not very good at it. Anyway.
Wait, so is Antushka just posting in the right places, or are you framing it in some way?
I try and frame it in a way. So
okay.
what I
It's
want
the
to not
framing.
do is have it be total clickbait. So I try and make a title that's provocative, but I feel like the first few I did weren't fair because I just posted a question and didn't answer it.
Okay.
And so
What
then
are you
then
going
it
to title
felt
this one?
so then so I've changed it. So I still have the provocative title, but then I try and give my own thoughts just to be fair.
Yeah.
So that it's not me just trying to extract
Yeah.
content out of other people.
Yeah.
But this last one was there was this one person who was just railing against Islam, basically, and ended up deleting. I felt good about this because I responded to him, and then they deleted their stuff after I responded.
Right.
So I felt like, okay.
There's some other long responses that I haven't gotten to. I probably won't. I get to.
Oh,
I
really?
do about a couple days of responding, and then I give
Yeah.
up. Because there was
Yeah.
somebody this last time that was like, obviously these people don't know anything about feudalism,
Yeah. And
and
we
like did a
the-
long. It was like 8 paragraphs.
Okay. Were they right?
I don't know. You're like, uh-oh.
Well, I got to go read it now and combat, because there was another person that was going after you, and they kept trying to make a point about private property. Sorry, but that's why it's on the mind.
Yeah.
And the idea that just because we were making the point, Rosewater Lane in this last book was making the idea that the American Revolution was actually about private property, kind of fundamentally, the right for anybody to own it. And so this person was, I feel like, doing a red herring where they were saying, basically to what you were saying, that private property existed before America. And my point was what does that have anything to do? It doesn't mean it was fulfilled or fully realized in other places, right?
It's something
Yeah.
I've noticed. It's a technique that I've now seen as a recurring or in a recurring way on Reddit. I think to dismiss an argument, to say that thing has always existed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say something like there was a huge spike in the idea of, personal authorship in the 19th century with, famous composers, somebody would be like, there were personal authors. There have always been personal authors.
Yeah, right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
Maybe there have always
could there
been people that have signed their
yes.
names to things. But I'm talking about a big, a noticeable difference.
Yeah. Yeah, or just, again, a lot of the ideas being people were being owned as property. And it's of
Right.
course, that was true and that was horrible. And it wasn't, the property rights weren't extended to everybody, but they were extended to more people than in feudal and monarchic Europe was sort of the central point. It was a starting point.
Right.
And
Do you say this knowing anything about feudalism?
I know nothing about feudalism.
We
I don't
did
know, I
read
do
a
now.
chapter about feudalism. That was the
It's
main
a-
argument against it. Now I remember the feudalism thing. These
Yeah.
people don't know anything about feudalism. Feudalism wasn't free at all.
Yeah, and again, we talk about that.
We
And
didn't
actually,
say it was free. We said that
Yes.
it has a certain element of preserving the freedom within your class.
well, actually, so what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go and I'm going to comment on that. And it's a dual view of reality, because remember, that's how she opens the chapter, saying she's like, feudalism is this.
Remember, Brother
Yeah,
X?
anyway.
That's how she
I'm
opens
going
the
to
chapter.
comment on it by just saying that freedom is free of
Yeah.
the need to be free.
Yes, it's true. Parliament Funkadelic.
Yeah.
Very good.
There we go. Nice.
So what are you? How are you going to provoke with
Yeah,
this
I was
episode?
actually thinking about that. How are we going to provoke with this one?
It's a good question. Well, you get into private property, that's going to be a provocation. I'm just telling you.
What about Liszt or Berlioz?
I don't know if those are going to provoke
Schumann.
people. Schumann was an idiot.
Oh man.
Well, you do that on a musicology thing, you might get a little bit of
Yeah, it depends. It
bites.
depends where you post it. Right?
Yeah. The problem is we've got a brand now. I wouldn't probably recommend posting about this episode in the anarcho-capitalist.
No, I will not.
Let me ask you this: Am I allowed to post it anywhere where people can identify me?
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't tag me.
Just don't tag you.
You can tag me if you want. I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't really care. I mean, a little bit.
Well,
but
I mean,
it's-
if you do, that's fine. I don't care either way, but I'll probably share it. Like,
yeah.
not that I have followers anywhere. But,
No, that's
you
fine.
know.
And it's more of just a funny thing of,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we've each said our names. Actually,
No?
no, I don't think anybody said my name. But we've said Antushka's accidentally and unaccidentally, and I forgot to bleep it a few times. I need to go back. His cover's blown.
Cover's blown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do we provoke with this episode?
I don't know. You won't provoke, but I would lean into the post hoc dunking.
Well, I think you provoke by getting at this idea of like, is a piece the same or like, where's the difference between an arrangement and the piece, and is it a derivative? Well, it is a derivative, but is it the same? Does it stand on the same sort of plane as the original?
Is it a degradation, maybe?
Yes, or is it degraded? Yeah, in some way, or does it like sit secondary to it?
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, or get on the idea of like, should listeners be paid to listen? Because again, I think that's an implication of what he's kind of saying. If you want to, take it there.
Nice. Well, you should
Anyway.
talk to BMI about that. And then we can all be getting checks all the time.
Well, in a sense, we are. No, we're not. We're not getting paid,
Right.
but we're getting paid
Well, I am, but-
with music. With the, that's our
Might be.
payment. It's beautiful music.
Wait, you said my name? Ah.
Oh yeah.
No.
I will
you
bleep.
could have thrown it off. You could have been like, yeah, my.
Yeah, might be.
Okay, well now I have to bleep like 5 times. It's fine. I will bleep them all. I am the bleep master.
Dude, the bleeps are so funny.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and to answer your question about swearing, no, I generally bleep swears at the beginning just because I do feel like, like maybe with YouTube or something. But honestly, it probably analyzes the entire audio at this point. But I feel like at one point it would really just hone in on stuff at the beginning. It doesn't really matter. It's not like we have traction anywhere, and we don't have any sponsors.
I don't think we should take sponsors.
Whoa. Not even.
You should get sponsored by BMI.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That would be weird.
I have an
Body
offer.
mass index. And when you guys say BMI, that's what I think about.
Yeah, we were talking about body mass index, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you think about when I say ass cap?
Nice. See? Okay, you're warming up now. That was
Who's
good.
warming
All right, guys, let's
You.
start the episode.
Yeah, we should start now. Okay. Cool. Well, I think, did we get all the points out? I think,
I think we got
Those are most-
every single one.
Yeah.
overall, I enjoyed it. I mean, he was tough to read, but
Was it better on the third read through?
yeah, it was. I actually understood it.
It got a lot easier.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. All right. We did
I
it.
have one last
Yes.
question. Were you drinking a White Russian, Antushka?
Oh, no. Iced coffee.
Oh, iced coffee.
Yeah.
Wow. What a
White
man.
Russian. I
At this
actually don't
hour?
like White Russian. I don't like Kahlua at all.
Yeah,
Were you drinking wine?
I was.
Nice.
A White Russian would have been
drinking.
fun. That would have been a fun answer.
Sparkling coconut water.
HEB?
HEB.
Nice.
We should be sponsored
The
by
best.
them.
What?
Yeah. Anyway.
Sponsored by them? Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks,
All right.
Brother X.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Let me know if you want to do another chapter on copyright, or
Oh,
if
yeah.
not, I won't be offended.
Well,
Yeah.
honestly, I think at some point it would be good too.
Oh, what are
Let
we doing
me-
next week? Maybe we should figure that out too.
I thought we were doing Socrates.
That's fine, but we should tell everybody who's listening still.
Oh yeah. So we're gonna
We
go
gotta
to
tease the next episode.
That's right. We're gonna go to Socrates, Plato, if you will. Socrates' apology, Socrates' defense, however you want to say it.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. We'll do that.
All right.
All right, goodbye.
And let me skim back through this thing and try to figure out if there's another chapter that you guys might enjoy.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. This is not. Oh. Okay. I was gonna say
All right,
this
I
is
can
not
say
the
anything now.
Yeah. This is not the
All right.
last you'll see of Brother X.